Morning, everybody. If we're all ready, we will make a start. We'll start with apologies. Dom.
We have apologies for Councillor Carr and Stuart Green. Thank you.
Item 2, late items to be introduced by the Chair. I have no late items to introduce. Councillor Holmes has just come in. But I do have a bit of an update on external auditors. The astute amongst you will have noticed that the external auditors are not here again. Hassan had asked whether he could dial into today's meeting to deliver his part of it, because he had clashes with a large number of audit committees today. I did want him to be present, but the realisation that he might not actually be present for the whole of the meeting, when part of external audit's role is to see what the audit committee are doing and saying, to ensure that we are giving sort of good value for money, and to see effective challenge taking place, it just seemed a bit odd for him to not then be here for all of it. I was also unclear, because he'd said that there were a number of audit committee meetings that he had today, whether he would actually be available when it came to his item on the agenda. But more so, and the discussion that I had with the Vice Chair, was that had this been a one-off, that we'd have been happy to accept that he appeared via Teams, even though there's no legislation in place for any of the members of the committee to do that. But it's not a one-off. External Audit haven't been present for many of the meetings this year. They haven't offered to attend remotely this year. So after a bit of discussion, I didn't see what point there was of Hassan attending remotely unless he could assure us he would be at the whole meeting. I've just checked with Dom and been told that no, he couldn't, because he has other committee meetings that he has to prioritise. And I think that sums up our relationship, sadly, with them this year, that our committee and our council has not been one that's been prioritised by external audit, which is really quite concerning. So when it gets to the item on the agenda, I am sorry that committee members won't be able to ask questions directly, but I'm also not confident that direct answers would have revealed that much given previous meetings. So when we do get to that item, any questions that members do have will be taken down and will be sent to Ernst Young for responses. Yes, Councillor Hazelgrave.
Chair, I think it would be worthwhile sending him the link to all the YouTube versions of the meeting and tell him if you want to see how we've been performing, it's there on record. It's a public meeting.
Excellent suggestion. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jennings, thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I was going to ask something very similar, to observe that as they are recorded and available, do we know whether he's already watching them?
I don't think we do know. Do we know if anyone's watching today? Right, so back to the agenda. Any declarations of interest? Nope. Super. So the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of January. Any, that says 23rd of January, it says 25th of January on the minutes, and now I'm unsure what date the meeting was. Any comments on the meeting that was held on the... at some point. Any comments either for accuracy or anything that wants to be picked up that isn't covered anywhere else in the agenda? Looking at Councillor Kerr, no? Councillor Holmes. It was the 25th, thank you. Councillor Holmes?
Did I notice it said we finished at 12 something AM, not PM? That was all.
It did, and we certainly... Well, you know, if you thought that was a long one, this might be the same. So apologies in advance, but well spotted. Super. So next item is the outstanding resolutions, for which I will hand over to Richard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Take you straight to the Appendix 1. first item there around the independent persons, there's a comment there that a recruitment pack is being prepared for independent members of the Audit and Governance Committee along with the Standards Committee, so Alex is looking after that. The second point on there is about the members of the committee recommended that some sampling should be done to declare qualifications by candidates. It's all to do with the risk accepted recommendation on the pre-employment checks. And I've had a procedural guideline come through from the recruitment team, which is very extensive, explaining how they do check all of the qualifications. All essential qualifications are checked. So that gives me a lot of assurance anyway. Committee were asking for sampling. There is a cost sometimes to where they will go into try and get hold of qualifications for institutions or establishments that no longer exist. But the actual procedure does give detailed how to check a qualification, what to look for, what some of the frauds are. So in my opinion, it's very extensive. And I think that's sufficient really for what we need. Certainly with my role as head of audit, I'm happy with that. And the other part of that was you'd requested that Paul Simpson as Chief Exec attended the committee to talk about management's progress on recommendations. I'll hand over to yourself, Chair, to Paul.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you, Paul, for attending. It was really interesting. We noted that when I joined the committee, the Chief Exec used to come to every single meeting, and we've not had any reason to see you at all. I think since you've joined as Chief Exec. I mean, I know we tried to kick you out last night or something else and replace you with Alison, but but yeah, if you'd be able to give a little bit of an update to the committee in respect of the implementation of internal audit recommendations, that would be super, and we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for asking me to come along. I'm always very happy to attend the Audit Committee, and we'll do so in the future if I'm required to do so. So, in terms of the implementation of internal audit recommendations, just to, I guess, give hopefully some reassurance to the committee, this is something that I take extremely seriously as Chief Executive, and I hope that most members will be aware of my professional background. I am still a member of SIPFA, my professional institute. My background is in this world, so I guess that gives an added flavour, if you like, in terms of how important good governance is to me as a Chief Executive. I've made it very clear to my senior team that it is unacceptable to delay for whatever reason. And yes, of course, I understand that we're all busy. It's difficult times in local government right here, right now. I think everybody knows that. However, internal audit recommendations, particularly those with, kind of high-risk consequences, must be implemented as soon as possible within a reasonable timescale. And Richard and his team do a really, really good job in identifying areas of risk and putting forward recommendations. And where we've got reports that, particularly those that are deemed inadequate, then they should be highlighted. And what we've agreed going forward under some new, what I guess I would call performance management arrangements, is that Richard will be attending the corporate leadership team on a regular basis, at least quarterly, to talk about the work of the internal audit team. And that will give me the opportunity to flush out any internal audit recommendations that, for whatever reason, haven't been implemented in a timely manner. And rest assured, Chair, and the rest of the committee, that I've already made it very clear that it's unacceptable to me that internal audit recommendations aren't followed up on and aren't implemented quickly. And that is something that Richard obviously will have my full support on. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. It's really, really positive to hear your support for internal audit. Not that I expected anything less. Members of the committee, any questions for Paul? Councillor Hazelgrave.
No, just that I'm indeed very reassured by what the Chief Executive's told us. Clearly his background with SIPFA and his understanding of how important that recommendations are carried forward is clearly something that's getting right to the top, and that's where it needs to be, so that it changes the culture in the organisation.
Thanks, Councillor Hazelgrave. Completely agree. Anybody else? Anything for Paul? No? Super. Thank you, Paul.
With your permission, Chair, would you mind if I left the meeting? Because only because I've got a train to catch to Birmingham, because I'm being asked to speak at an event. So
well, in that case, then absolutely.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
I will pass back over to Richard then.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the next item is around the internal audit progress report, and the committee had invited officers from neighbourhood boards to attend this meeting. They one attended last time, but weren't unfortunately able to cover all the items on there. My understanding is that someone will be attending the meeting today. Charles is here, so that's covered. Whistleblowing policy, that was brought to the last meeting, and committee asked that for a couple of amendments to be made to the policy, which Paul McMahon has done. Paul Simpson will be appearing again at the July meeting, because you've invited him along to that to talk about information governance this time. The next item is an update on the 21-22 Statement of Accounts from Pete Shilcock.
Who's moved, but yeah. Pete and or Alison.
So the 21-22 accounts, the audit has commenced on the accounts. It began on the 3rd of January. It is, to be fair, slow progress. They have started issuing samples for us to provide evidence, which all the accountancy teams are working on. They've issued the audit plan, which is on the agenda of this meeting. I don't really want to touch on that now, or whether to leave that to the last, because within that plan you'll see a timeline. They are basically going to be on site until mid-April. They will then go off-site and do other audits for the NHS and local government, as I understand it. They'll be back in July to recommence the 21-22 audit, with a timeline of completion by October this year, if everything goes according to plan. Obviously, any conversation around the 22-23 audit of the accounts that we're about to prepare, there's been no discussion about that, other than an indication that it will be late in this calendar year. And that is kind of where we are.
Thanks, Pete. I can hear audible groans across the chamber. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Can we complete the 22-23 audit before 21-22 is completed?
The answer to that is no. They've got to complete the audit of the 21-22 accounts before they'll even start looking at 22-23.
Have we already raised with government the fact that we won't be meeting their ideal target times for 22-23? Because presumably we're expected to do 22-23 by September, aren't we?
So there's obviously a national issue in terms of accounts being late. We're experiencing something that's probably unprecedented for us, but is not something that other authorities are not aware of. Central government have issued, have asked for information from all local authorities around the state of their accounts, of which we've sent in recently. So they are aware of the situations, and they are keeping those communication lines open. So yes, we have communicated that, Councillor Kerr. But obviously, you know, just to say we are as mindful as the audit committee is around the unsatisfactory progress that we've been making on our audit. It does have an impact on the team in terms of resourcing as well. And we do keep those communication lines open with external auditors, and I think it's really important at this stage that whilst we're being firm and assertive with the auditors, that we maintain some level of communication with them, enable us to get it over the line, because a breakdown in those relationships would be the very last thing that we would want to do. So just to reassure you that we are being firm and assertive, but there's only so much that we can do with that.
Thanks, Alison. Councillor Dinser and then Philip.
How long has it been now since we've had the accounts? Which accounts have been confirmed? And assertive, I know, Alison, you're saying you will be assertive, but that doesn't seem to be working. And the assertiveness we've heard and sort of following up and sort of trying to tackle this. We've even written a letter. And what's been the response to the letter? So I think this is really concerning. I know it's a national problem, but it's having an impact locally for us. And we have to be worried on behalf of our council and our residents in terms of accountability. So what more do we need to do, Chair, as an audit and governance committee, and also as the council? It just is not good enough.
No, absolutely, Councillor Dinser. And I mean, one of the remit of this committee is to provide an effective challenge. We need to be seen to be doing that, even if that's challenging external audit. Philip, did you want to come in, and then I'll ask?
Just to say, the work that's going on, and it is going on at the moment from what Pete says, are we satisfied that the people who are doing the work can do the work, have capability of doing the work? Because quite clearly a big issue about external auditor is the lack of staff to do the work nationally, as well as within the firms. That's the sort of one area really. But I think coming back to what Councillor Dinser said earlier on, I mean, we should be communicating with, and I'm sure we are all communicating with PSAA, with the FRC, with whoever, to explain the situation, to keep them up to date with what the situation is, because quite clearly there's a new body coming on to oversee local government audit. I forget what its name is called. It's called something quite complicated. I can't remember what it's called. And they will be fully up and running, I think, sometime early 24, I think, that the intention is. They need to be appraised of what's happening before they agree their final terms of reference with the Department for Local Government and so on. So I think we do need to keep on top of it. I'm sure Alison is, but I mean, I'm just reiterate. There's two aspects really. Do they have the staff to do the work, and are we doing everything that we should be doing, as Councillor Dinser just mentioned?
No, absolutely. And I mean, also there's what knock-on effects does that have when Ernst Young are no longer our external auditors, and we have other external auditors wanting to come in and look at things potentially at the same time. Pete, are you able to answer about sort of numbers of staff and effectiveness on that bit?
In terms of the numbers of staff, they appear to have about 4 auditors, I think, on it at the moment. The names I've seen coming through on emails and requests from their portal. In terms of their ability, all I will say is I'm compiling some issues log. And I don't really want to say any more than that, but I am compiling an issues log.
That doesn't fill us with faith, Pete. Okay, this item is obviously featured later on in the agenda, and I wonder whether, instead of looking at it now, whether we look at something for future committee, a recommendation for future committee, just to try and keep on top of this. It's very difficult when the committee year ends, well, our committee year ends now, and a new committee will come in, a new chair will come in. I mean, I can't imagine that any new committee won't find this a really important topic and that it will be missed off of future agendas. And I'm sure Richard won't let that happen. Yeah, I think we need to have some sort of wording. So if anybody wants to think up something suitable for that when we get to that point, that would be really helpful. Last item on the outstanding resolutions is the self-assessment form, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's the one highlight for all committee members each year, isn't it, to fill this out? So this year we did a slightly different one with a more interactive one. I've had 6 responses. The score overall could have been out of 200. I've averaged it out, and the average score from the 6 members is 160, which is not bad at all. From those of you who remember looking at this, these are good practice questions, but there's 3 distinct sections. There's one column that looks at where we think that things do not comply. 3 columns where there's partially complies and the extent of the improvement needed, i.e. significant improvement, moderate improvement, or minor improvement. And then the final one fully complies. In the main, most of those that responded felt that the committee fully complied or there were minor improvements needed. The key areas, and there are 6 of them that the committee, those that responded, felt that it needed major improvement or significant improvement. One, surprisingly enough, was around external audit, but we'll gloss over that one. The second one was, has the committee met privately with external and internal audit? That was an area that at least 2 or 3 members felt was in need of significant improvement, and one felt it was in need of major improvement. There was also an area around, have all committee members been appointed to ensure they have the necessary skills and knowledge? Again, that was deemed an area for improvement. Has the committee obtained positive feedback on its performance? Again, that's something that the committee doesn't do, and that's something perhaps we can have a look at in the future. Do audit committee recommendations have traction with those in leadership roles? That's an interesting one. How you measure that, I do not know, but again, it was felt by at least 2 members that responded that needed significant improvement. And the final one is, has the committee evaluated whether and how it adds value to the organisation, to the council? And again, we do the annual report. One of the things we need to look at in the annual report is, how we pick up on the role and purpose of the committee and get that into there to actually demonstrate really how the committee adds value. And I think that can be picked up through the annual report, but again, at the moment, it's not seen by some of the committee members as an area that we do very well. And that was it really on the self-assessment, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. I am heartened that you had quite so many responses eventually, and I do thank committee members for returning those responses. I hope that the members of the committee that were unsure about sort of the the response from leadership are a little bit heartened by Paul Simpson's comments this morning. And yeah, it is an important part of the committee, and we've always sort of looked at when we have those self-assessment forms completed throughout the year, and that balance of trying to get people to have had long enough on the committee to feel like they're able to fill in those forms. But also, it's just as important when people aren't so sure about what they're filling in, because that does feed into how we do things in future years. And it may be that the self-assessment form gets tweaked, or it gets tweaked most years actually, doesn't it? But it is a really important aspect of the committee. So thank you. Any questions on that from anybody? Councillor Hazelgrave.
Just, I've always thought when I've been on the Audit and Accounts Committee and our Audit and Governance that we do add value, but it's a biased opinion because obviously I was a member of the committee. But I do think it's important that we try and find a mechanism which demonstrates that, because, if we're not adding value, which I doubt, why are we here? And that goes for any committee, so it would be, I don't know if other councils have a model or a template or something through which they can demonstrate that they add value. I mean, I know we report annually to the full council. Perhaps we ought to have a strand which has a heading, adding value, and actually try and annotate all the things where we think we've made progress or made things work better, etc. Yeah, just a thought.
Excellent thought, Paul, and something that we will then pick up from next week. Thanks, Richard. Lucy. absolutely. I wonder if there is something that we can, I know it puts more work on officers, yet more work on officers, but maybe there is just some sort of very quick follow-up that can be done. Again, we'll try and pick that up next week. Okay, thank you. So, item 6 is the minute extract from council on Alistry Hall and golf course. Let me just get the right screen up. So, as all members here will be aware, because I think you were all at the meeting, and Philip is no doubt aware, because I'm sure he has no better use of his evenings than to watch things on YouTube. This item was referred to the Audit and Governance Committee at full council by Councillor Shanker. So I will ask Councillor Shanker to introduce this. We also have John Sadler here from Assets Management, I think is the right department. And all I suppose will say is that what we need to be assured of at this committee is that good governance has been followed. The procedural motion for Audit and Governance to look into this was supported cross-party. I've never had to remind people that this is not a political committee, and I don't expect to have to start doing that now. But the debate does need to be neutral, and overall we do need to decide whether good governance has been followed and agree any future steps if necessary. So Councillor Shanker, if you would like to present this item.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee. I mean, I'm not going to go into the debate around full council, but the reasoning I explained that evening was I just felt, having had lots of representation from various people and lots of representation from one individual person, the motion that we were discussing that evening at full council, I just didn't think was going to reach any sensible conclusion in that arena. And the Audit and Governance Committee is probably the best committee within this council to decide how as a council we want to take this forward. And the reason, so that was the reason for the referral, and one of the main factors was recently there's been lots of allegations and counter-allegations which I think jeopardise the reputation of this council, irrespective of any political allegiances. I can sort of split these, and I don't plan to take lots of time talking about this, thankfully, everyone will be saying. But three main concerns, because some of the allegations that were being made haven't been followed up with me or justified, and I didn't feel fit for me to then be making those on behalf of other people when there's nothing behind them. So the three main areas was one around the World Heritage status. Get my words out, being protected, and I'm told an application was made back last year. A decision's been made to refuse information on that to the organisation or the individual who made that application. And it's probably fair to say they believe that the grounds of that refusal are dubious. So that's around the first point. So whatever actions the committee want to take on pursuing that and looking into that any further, again, is a matter for the committee to decide. The second allegation, which probably is the most serious out of the three at this stage, is around the tree removal works that have happened around the area, because it has been suggested that criminal acts have been inadvertently or advertently carried out, and I think that's a serious matter, not just for us as a council, but our partners in Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, and in fact the individuals who carried out that work, because I'm told there is individual liability in law for those works, and I'm told our tree preservation officer has been involved in this and agrees that the trees shouldn't probably have been removed, and I don't know whether he has or she has said that. I'm being told that they've said that. But the likelihood of giving retrospective approval is high because it's a policy the council have been pursuing with the rewilding of the area. And then the third point, again, so something for the committee to consider. The third point for me is around the sale of Alistry Hall, the protracted sale of Alistry Hall. And again, I'm not particularly interested in the particular person who at one stage was the sort of preferred bidder, if we want to use that title. The name's been out there in the press. There are family connections with a certain political group. But again, you know, if that was the named preferred bidder after various due diligence at the time, that's fair enough. But as members will know, that sale never happened at the time. A number of years have passed, and it's good that John's here because I've had recent correspondence with John, who's, as usual, always very helpful in providing help and guidance on the situation. But my concern around the sale of Alistry Hall, Chair, is obviously a deal was agreed many years ago for whatever reason over a protracted period. It didn't happen. That party, I believe, now is interested in buying or potentially buying the hall again. And my concern around there is, have we done a competitive exercise this time round to make sure we get the best value for council taxpayers in any potential sale of the hall? I'm again told, and I've not got evidence for this, but I'm told 4 new offers or expressions of interest have been made directly to the chief exec of the council, and I just hope all offers are considered fairly, and the best value for money for council taxpayers is the offer that's pursued, rather than a historic offer that was made several years ago. What I will say in finishing, Chair, particularly on the first 2 points, the information that I have, and I know the group have been fairly active, has come to me through Andrew Pickin, who I believe is here in the public gallery today. So any further information or additional information you want on those points, with your permission, Chair, or the committee's permission, I'd suggest either now or outside of this meeting, conversations are held with Andrew, so you know the best informed decisions can be made, rather than me trying to portray information on behalf of somebody else. It's always best to listen and hear the information directly. So they're my three main points. Again, I'd suggest a conversation with Andrew Pickin at some stage, but you know the referrals made with all good intention to protect the reputation and integrity of this council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shanker. Yeah, I think I echo some of the points you made, that we'd had a little bit too much back and forth at full council over this particular item, and it did seem a sensible suggestion to refer this to Audit and Governance Committee, as I say, to look at the governance of the proceedings that have happened. Mr. Pickin, thank you for attending. As I have said to you already, but just for the benefit of the committee, that unfortunately there's no sort of right of reply for you in this arena today. It would be potentially if the committee decides that good governance hasn't been followed, and that this then goes to some further audit, that then people may well wish to speak to you. But as I say, unfortunately, in this arena, there is no right to reply. So obviously, you're very welcome.
Just to reinforce that, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Pickin. John, I don't know whether it would be helpful for you to come in to respond to the points that Councillor Shanker has made now, or whether you would like this to go to the members of the committee for questions first. I'm happy to take what you're comfortable with.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, I'm the head of Estates and Property Review, just for the record. Yes, obviously I can't really comment on the tree work, so that's sort of outside my remit. And to a certain extent, the World Heritage status. Obviously, I can comment on the disposal process and where we are, but it may be useful if we have questions first, and perhaps I can then wrap that up.
Super, thank you. Members of the committee, do we have questions on this item? Philip?
I'm somewhat obviously at a loss with other members of the committee, because obviously I'm not a member of the council and I wasn't at the council meeting. I'm just want to know what investigations have already been carried out, if any, and what was their conclusion, and where was that conclusion taken?
Councillor Dinser.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a loss really in terms of we've heard Councillor Shanker's evidence to the extent as much as he knows, but there are gaps. So I need to understand as a committee member what process can be undertaken to look at each of these three areas of concern raised, and then for information to be made available to us, for us then to consider what our views are and what we think needs doing. In the absence of that, it's really difficult to raise questions or ask questions, and who do we ask them to at the moment? So maybe we have to look at initiating a process of information being brought to us from whatever relevant source, if it's not in this room at the moment, to give us what we know, what we don't know, and if there's information we need to find out about in terms of, or verify, have that information, and then we can do our job. At this moment, with the information in front of us, I don't think we can.
Thanks, Councillor Dinser. I think, again, I agree with some of the points that you've made. The role of our committee for this item is, as I said, to establish whether we think good governance has been followed. If we don't think good governance has been followed, the suggestions would be that we ask either internal audit or external audit, but I think internal audit definitely have better capacity than external audit to look into this, and are present. That we would then, if we don't think that good governance has been followed, and as I say, you need the information and answers to some of the questions, but the suggestion would be that we then ask internal audit to scope an investigation, and we would then need to form wording for the scope of an investigation. But that would be sort of next steps. Councillor Kerr, Councillor Hesselgrave, and Councillor Jennings. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I agree that there seem to be a lot of rumours, and often rumours show that there is something happening underneath, and uncertainty. And for me, it's, yes, the potential sale was announced some time ago, and nothing seems to have moved forward. And the rewilding project seems to have been, in some ways, almost camouflaging the fact that the sale hadn't happened. And I don't want to make any judgment about whether it should or shouldn't have gone forward, because I don't think that's for us to do. But I think it's the process there's been a lack of clarity, and there have been these rumours about other potential bidders coming through, which we've not known about. And I think to have a thorough look at what is known rather than the rumours would be really helpful. I've not heard any comments about trees prior to this. There has been information about whether or not English Heritage have a consideration as to the value of it. There's been very little in terms of reports. I've not noticed a report explaining all this going to Cabinet, so maybe it's about time that there was a report written, and internal audit might be the best people to write that.
Thanks, Lucy. Councillor Hasselgrove.
Yeah, I mean,
suppose we need to take the view that is the council's reputation at risk if anything comes out and it hasn't been thoroughly and extensively investigated, and that people who aren't happy have had a chance to put their case and either go away happy, or the council says and puts its hands up and says, maybe we didn't do the best thing here. But there are lessons to be learned, and that's a good positive thing to come out of it, as well as actually clearing the air in terms of the way we function and the way we do listen to concerns of residents. And Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and other organisations that were thrown in, which obviously are influential with a certain segment of the population, if not quite widely. So I think there are good reasons why this should, and it's a good idea to go to internal audit. They're experienced and investigated. They know how the council runs and how it should run. And that would seem to be a good way to move forward. And then internal audit could come and give a report to the audit committee. Yeah?
Thanks.
That's my personal view.
No, absolutely valid. Thank you. Councillor Jennings?
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the 3 points that have been raised, I can't, hand on heart, say I know anything about it. And I don't think that I'm in a position to say that good governance has been followed on any of these issues. So I'd be happy to refer this further into either internal audit or our own independent member, because I think trying to refer it externally to external auditors, it just would not happen, because we're already struggling to get our own accounts done. So that's my thoughts, Chair.
Thanks, Harvey. John, would you like to come back to the issues raised?
Yes, thank you for members for putting their questions there. I think what might be useful is if I go through a bit of a timeline highlighting some of the decision points and where things have made, not to sort of hopefully help the committee to either put a resolution together or a recommendation. Like I said, I can't really focus on the tree thing because that's outside my remit. I haven't got any really background information on that one. Just looking at the World Heritage status side, this was an external application made to make the golf course part of historic landscape. There may be some wording there which I've missed, but that as an application went to English Heritage. English Heritage asked the council to comment. I think some information was given. A lot of information was provided by the third party who made the application, and English Heritage then made the decision that they weren't going to designate it at this time. But if further information came along, they may reconsider it, which I think that helps hopefully provide some background to why the first issue raised by Councillor Shanker came about. I think that's why the money was being requested to do that. Looking at the hall, and I think an issue here is there's been several activities going on across the park and the hall, all of which have conflated, all of which have got things. We've talked about the rewilding, we've talked about the sale of the hall, also the golf course going on as well. Each of which interacts, but each of which has had information and decision-making processes around them. If I just focus on the sale of the hall at the moment, I think is which probably is a central thing on this. Obviously, the hall and golf course was marketed back in 2000 and, through my list, sort of 2019, and we had several bids submitted, and after a period of due diligence involving our external agents, and I must admit at this time, this was only officers looking at it at the time. There's no influence or anything from outside members. A recommendation was then taken to Cabinet in 11th of September 2019 to go with a preferred bidder, and a recognition that the preferred bidder only wanted the hall. That meant that had implications on the golf course. And the recommendation was that they go with the preferred bidder and a consultation exercise be entered into about the golf course. So it went to Cabinet in 11th of September 2019. Obviously, we had the consultation exercise happened, and just to go back to the Cabinet report, there was delegated authority to look at whether the golf course is shut based on the consultation exercise. Following the closure of the consultation exercise in early 20, that was obviously we've got COVID in way, but by August, it was agreed that there were no viable bids for the golf course, and the golf course was shut on the 31st of December. Just park that for the moment. The Hall deal was going through on the basis of a Cabinet report. The potential preferred bidder then went and got an application, plan application. Just to remind the committee members, this is a Grade 2 listed building at risk, so English heritage. So we need a listed building consent, so they needed other consents as well. So that took a bit of time. He did put a lot of time and effort into doing that. Consent was granted later that year. Then obviously COVID affected his business, so effectively nothing much happened. The legal work was progressed slowly. Obviously the golf course, just coming back to that, members, full council looked at this again, and a resolution was said to, should the golf course and the hall be remarketed. Cabinet revisited that on the 4th of August 2021, and they declined to do that. They wanted to go ahead with a preferred bidder. Negotiations progressed in 21, early 22, and we were pushing as officers quite hard to get this done, conscious of the building deteriorating. At that time, the preferred bidder decided to pull out because of the financial impact of COVID. We then had a period of looking at what to do next. He withdrew his bid. We had an internal look at to say whether we could use a hall internally. That went away. Earlier this year, the preferred bidder came back with a revised bid, but also we were conscious that other bidders were taking interest in the hall, and the process at the moment is that we're looking at the best way forward. So obviously I'm conscious that we need to meet our obligations under section 123, best consideration. That decision hasn't been made yet. Hopefully I can make a decision. We've got a meeting with officers next week, which we can then sort of draw a line under this and say, we're going, this is the way we're going to go. So that's the only decision been made on that yet. But I think I just want to draw your attention to a couple of other issues. One, in early August 21, a member of the public raised a complaint with the local government ombudsman regarding the golf course, the closure of the golf course. And in January 2022, the ombudsman resolved that he found no fault on the council on the closing of the golf course. In addition, in late 2021, a third party made an application to the Secretary of State requesting that under their powers of Section 98 of the Local Government and Planning Act, that they require the council to remarket the golf course. Following evidence submitted by the council, the Secretary of State decided it would be not appropriate for the Section 98 direction to be given in this case, i.e. the Secretary of State did not require the council to dispose of the golf course. So what I'm sort of conclusion is that obviously there has been a process. It's been to Cabinet at least twice. It's obviously the delegated authority was examined. External bodies in both the local ombudsman and the Secretary of State have looked at elements of this and come back down in the council favour. We're in a position now where we need to do Section 123 due diligence, and we're about to make that call. So we are reflecting on where we are with the bids. It's unfortunate it's taken this too long. I think people tend to forget there was a COVID period there. Yes, business went on, but the preferred bidder actual business was shut down for 18 months and it took him time to come back. Yes, he's put a revised bid in, but that's been considered as part of the wider process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John, for that. I think we've all probably learned quite a bit about what's gone on over the last few years. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I'd just like to understand better the process regarding a bidder withdrawing and then coming back again. Would somebody who does that have any preferential status over somebody who was previously not in the running or had previously not expressed an interest at the right time? And is the revised bid actually more or less than was originally offered?
Taking your first point is, obviously, anybody who's bid on a building and got planning consent has got an advantage if we go to the market. However, one of the key things from our point of view, we need to make sure is deliverability. Can that project be delivered? And what's the best, is that in the best interest of the council? So there's criteria that we will be, if we were minded to go on that route, to have a look at all bids in a fair and transparent manner. And, sorry, could you remind me your second point?
The first point was whether or not you're on a level playing field. And I've still not quite got whether or not you are on a level playing field.
It will be a level playing field, yes.
And whether that playing field is previous bidders who weren't selected, or people who have expressed an informal, put in an expression of interest without a request for bids going in. So there are two groups of people: previous people being rejected and people who didn't bid at the appropriate time. And I'm not clear whether we're on a level playing field for those or not. And secondly, whether the bid that came in, the rebid that came in, was more or less than the original bid from that bidder.
Thank you for the clarification. I think it will be a level playing field if we are going to remarket the property.
Sorry, we haven't
made that decision yet. What I've said is we're looking through our process of what best we can do.
Okay,
we haven't made that final decision yet.
So can I just clarify, does the previous bidder who withdrew, have any preferential status over anybody else at the moment?
No.
Thank you.
Councillor Dinser.
Yeah, I mean, this is the selling of out freehold is a difficult thing. It used to be running for decades. So it's not been easy in the past, and it doesn't look like it's going to be easy now. So we're sort of starting again the whole process. That's what I'm understanding that we're doing now. And so I think it is important that it is a level playing field, and people, anybody and everybody should be allowed to bid into the process rather than being not allowed to bid based on previous applications. So, obviously treat them with the merit, but as long as it's an even playing field, that should be the case. And can the officer either confirm now or in the near future whether that is the case, will be the case, or not?
I suspect the officer can only answer on what has happened previously and not on what is going to happen in the future. And the reminder that our role here is to look at whether the things that have been done to date have followed good governance and the proper procedures. But if the officer would like to answer anything on what has happened previously, he's more than happy to.
Yes, I'd endorse that. I think it'd be difficult for me to put forward what the council will be doing in the future on this property, because this is perhaps not the forum to have that discussion.
Philip, you'd indicated, and then Councillor Jennings.
I'm slightly unhappy about the way the discussion's going, because I could rattle off a couple of dozen questions about the process and what's happened or what hasn't happened. and other things, and a lot of things I would need to know. And we could be here for hours talking about that. And I mean, the one thing I can do is ask questions. It's part of my training. So I'm slightly unhappy about the way it's going because, you know, there may be items which are confidential. I don't know. I really don't know. I think what we need to do is set up, give some sort of spec for an investigation to be properly carried out. It can't be done in an open forum like here today. It's impossible. I mean, you know, we can all raise questions. This needs to be done properly. A proper investigation needs to be done, looking into the whole aspect of the history of the thing. I'm not doubting the way you talk. I'm not doubting anything you say. I think it needs to be appraised in an independent manner. We need to find out what's happened, what hasn't happened, and indeed what the position is today and what's going to happen in future. And I think that cannot be done in an open forum like here today. And I think that we're in danger of going down that line of asking a lot of detailed questions, which I suspect probably can't be answered in an open forum. So I think we really need to get into a proper investigation. We can ask the internal audit to do it. We can give them a timeline, give them a spec, whatever. Internal audit is quite clearly the appropriate bit to do it. External audit, well, we know what our opinion of external audit is. That's another matter entirely. We could do that and report back to the next meeting, whenever the next meeting is going to be. That's really my point. I think we're in danger of going into a lot of detail here now, and I think it's really not going to get us anywhere other than confuse the whole picture. That's just my personal view. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Before I go to anybody else, Philip has made a recommendation that a scope, they need to scope out something for internal audit to look into. I mean, the first note I'd made particularly was about the trees. We don't have the details available. We cannot say whether good governance was followed in respect to that, or whether the rumours that we're told are true. Does anybody want to second Philip's recommendation? Okay. Apologies, Philip. Apparently your recommendation is not good enough. Would any councillor like to move the recommendation that our wonderful independent member has suggested? Councillor Jennings, your hand is up higher than anybody else's. Can I take it that you would like to move that recommendation? Would anybody like to second that recommendation? Councillor Kerr, you would like to second that?
Yes, Chair, and I'd like to have information from our Head of Internal Audit as to how soon he might be able to have people available to look into that. And I would suggest that he and you, with Councillor Shankar, agree, as he brought this to us, agree the remit that's to be explored.
Councillor Lindsay?
Or the committee can make any comment. So let's progress to that. And any questions, well, keep them to less detail, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe it'd be worthwhile, instead of referring to internal audit, referring to CMAP, because that is an independent organisation, and people may, I know internal audit is as well, but people might think, well, the council is investigating itself, and that doesn't look good in terms of, you know, procedure. Even though it would be a wrong assumption if people thought that. Just for transparency, I think we should refer to CMAP investigating and coming to this committee with what its findings are.
Harvey?
Couple of things, Chair. First of all, I know what I've proposed that motion, but could I ask for the specific words from Dom that he's recorded, please, so that I understand what I have actually proposed. And the second thing is, I would just like to say, for me, the original expressions of interest and the sale of Alistair Hall went through a lot of process. I think everyone in this chamber, as councillors, were appraised or involved in the making of the decision for that process. And I think it would be completely wrong for us to try and investigate ourselves as councillors, even though we're on an independent committee. I think the process itself, having involved all parties, I think it needs to be independent. The real question for me is about, at the moment, what we're looking at, the questions that are raised by Councillor Shanker is the future of Alistair Hall, and some of the questions from committee this morning are inappropriate, I think. I think we're in danger of embroiling ourselves in future decisions, which is not our role. So I'm quite happy to follow Philip's recommendations to make sure we get an independent answer.
Thanks, Harvey. Before I go to Dom to try and get him to sum up our craziness, Richard, as a multi-hat wearing person, do we need to, or should we be referring this directly to CMAP, or are we absolutely fine to refer this to internal audit, given the close nature of those two organisations and the fact that independent audit has not been involved in any of this so far?
Just to clarify on the CMAP/internal audit issue, CMAP are the providers of the internal audit service to Derby City Council and to 5 other organisations. So we're not directly responsible to the City Council. Anyway, internal audit, even though it is internal to the organisation, should be independent in its own mind anyway. So we should always be looking. I mean, we did the A52 investigation for a start. So I mean, we've proved there that we can be independent on these things. So I don't see a problem with going to internal audit or CMAP. They are one and the same for Derby City.
And can you answer Councillor Kerr's question about how much availability the team has to look into this?
We're very, very close to the end of the financial year, so we have got a number of audits to finish. We've got the plan coming up later on the agenda, so 1 or 2 of those things would have to be shelved to allow us to do this. We do have the resources. It's just a matter of reorganising what we've got planned for those. That's something I'll be talking to Hannah and Martin about as well, and how we do that. We have got a wealth of experience, as you say, of investigation. We've also got other people we can pull in. This is not something that, as an internal audit section, we would do purely on our own anyway. There are legal issues, so we would need to refer to the head of legal, who, just to give the committee some background, Mr. Pickin has been in correspondence with the Chief Executive on this, and the Chief Executive's response to Mr. Pickin was to send any information he had around his issues to myself as the head of internal audit. So I've received information from Mr. Pickin, which I'm going through at the moment, in conjunction with the head of legal. Have a look at those, because there are legal aspects that I will need a legal brain to tell me exactly what the thoughts are. I have my views, but so we have some understanding of it anyway.
Thanks, Richard. Dom, have you been able to write something down that Councillor Jennings might be able to approve?
The recommendation I've got is for Councillor Shanker, the committee chair and the head of internal audit, to agree the scope for an internal audit investigation and for a report to be brought back to a future committee meeting.
You happy with that, Harvey? Lucy, are you happy to second that as written? Committee, can I see a show of hands in favour of that recommendation, please? I think we have an agreement. Thank you for that. I think, and it was a discussion that we had at a previous meeting, that yes, because you are completely unaware of all of this, I think not necessarily in setting the scope of the meeting, but I think absolutely in terms of working with Richard going forwards, your experience and your impartiality, I suppose, in one respect, would be absolutely vital.
I mean, I wouldn't expect to take part in the detailed discussions, but quite in terms of speccing the work and ensuring that the work can be carried out to a reasonable level, in my view. I could liaise with Richard. I'm quite happy to do that, yeah.
If you're happy to do that, we would be very happy to have you involved, Philip, yes. Thank you, members of the committee. Councillor Shanker, thank you for bringing that to the committee. I look forward to scoping something out with you and with Richard, if we can do that quite quickly. I think the next meeting of Audit and Governance won't be until June, thank you. Whether it can be concluded by then, I don't know at this point, but the sooner that we get something scoped out for internal audit to look into, the sooner the investigation can happen. So I thank you, and I thank you for your time. You are free to leave. Okay, so item 7 is accounting policies. Pete, are you doing this one? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I dive headlong into the report, I've just spotted
Sorry, and apologies. Sorry, John, thank you very much for attending. You are also free to leave.
Thank you.
And I'm sure people will be in touch in the next few weeks.
Be surprised they're not.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, before I dive headlong into the report, I've just noticed a small typo. Paragraph 4.5 should clearly be 4.3, so apologies for that. So the report covers accounting policies for 22-23. We're not proposing to make any changes to accounting policies this time round. However, I would draw your attention to the aforementioned paragraph 4.3, where I talk about the temporary disclosure amendments relating to infrastructure assets. Now, members are obviously aware about the delays to the accounts being signed off, and this infrastructure asset issue is a contributory factor to that delay in sign-off. Now, this is a national issue around highways infrastructure assets that was brought to the attention of the National Audit Office last year, such that an audit firm raised queries about the way in which local authorities account for highways infrastructure assets. In a lot of cases, authorities treat the schemes as that, a scheme. So if we took the A52, for example, within that scheme, there are various assets. You've got the footbridge, obviously, the carriageway, traffic cameras, etc., etc. But we, a lot of local authorities, just treat that as a scheme and depreciate it straight line over 40 years. Now, what the audit firm queried was, well, hang on a minute, is it fair to say that that bridge might have the footbridge might have a longer lifespan than, say, and I'm just using the A52 as an example here, not specifically Derby. Has the footbridge got a longer lifespan than, say, the carriageway, or say the traffic lights, whatever? So it got kicked up to SITFA have been talking over solutions to get around this problem, and the government were also involved because they were concerned about the sector reputation, because there was a potential for accounts to be qualified if they couldn't overcome this issue. So what the solutions are twofold, and they are both temporary till 2024-25 accounts, but also cover accounts that are not yet been signed off by the auditors. So obviously covers 2021 and 21-22 in our case. So the two solutions are basically, for highways infrastructure assets, we're no longer required to disclose the gross book value and the accumulated depreciation, because the depreciation has the potential to be stated. So we're no longer obliged to disclose that in the accounts, and also the government have given us a statutory instrument that's been termed a statutory override that basically allows the auditors to sign off the accounts knowing that there's a potential issue around depreciation. So we've taken advantage of both of those provisions. The Code of Practice requires us to make some amended disclosures regarding infrastructure assets, which we've done, submitted to EY. We're awaiting EY's review of that. And that's kind of where we are with infrastructure assets. There is going to be a permanent solution to this issue, so we're working on that at the moment, but as of today, we've not been given an idea of what that is or what the time frame even is on what that permanent solution will be. So up until 24-25, we'll be taking advantage of these temporary provisions pending whatever SITFA propose as a final proposal, and then obviously we'll implement that as and when we know what that solution is.
Thanks, Pete. Philip.
Bit of a techie point, I suppose, but should not the policies reflect the fact that there's this temporary, this infrastructure assets position? Because it is a different change this year to what has happened in previous years. So I've had and it's probably a bit sad of me, but I actually looked at some accounting policies from other councils, and one or two of them have actually included that within their policies. It's to say something along the lines of infrastructure assets are to be recognised at nil value in accordance with regulation, you know, it ought to say something along those lines, I would have thought, for this year. I mean, we can change it in future years, but certainly this is going to be the position, as I understand it, until the end of 4-5, I think. Yeah. So I just question whether perhaps there should be something in the policies for this year, because it is something that's going to happen this year and hasn't happened in previous years. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we took the view that whilst broadly we're not going to change the way we're accounting for infrastructure assets, the accounting policy didn't need to change. However, we are making a disclosure in the accounts to that effect that we're taking advantage of these temporary provisions. So whilst the accounting policies themselves are not changing, we are making changes to the disclosures. So I think that's where we drew the subtle difference, that it's a disclosure issue as opposed to an accounting policy. But I'm happy to add something in if
it's a bit of a moot techie point. So I mean, quite clearly, yes, it will be in the accounts. I recognise that's fine. That's fine from disclosure points, but you know, it doesn't make a deal of difference whether it's in the policy so long as it's reflected in the accounts, and I'm sure it will be in detail. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, just to pick up on that point, those disclosures that I alluded to earlier that I've submitted to EY, they include a narrative to explain why we're doing it this way. Correct.
I say we've got a thumbs up. Everything is fine. Thank you, Philip. Lucy.
If we wanted to add something in, I will put it on page 20, where we've actually got the bullet point saying infrastructure straight line allocation over 40 years, and it could just have a brackets in accordance with the guidance we've got at the moment. But I think this is actually really weird, because we know that we repair our roads a lot more than every 40 years, and they become a liability if we don't look after them rather than an asset. So it just seems, I think that SITFA have got a hard job on their hands looking at this in any depth, and I look forward to seeing what they discover. We'll conclude.
Thanks, Lucy. Would you like to see page 21, did you say, updated? Is that a recommendation? I
think my preference would be to put something there just to show that we've thought about it.
Philip, does that work with the question that you raised?
That would, if there was anything going to go in, that was the sort of area it would go in. Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Members of the committee, would you be happy for that line to be added? Then yes, if Pete, if we can just add that in as a slight amendment, thank you. Any other questions on this item from any of the members that are still in the room? No? Then we will go with your recommendations, Pete. Thank you. Item 8 is partnership working, and it's Heather. And Heather, I know you have presented this in different guises to different committees, and I thank you for presenting it to us today.
Okay. My name's Heather Greenan. I'm Director of Policy Insight and Communication here at City Council, and do take a lead on partnership working at a strategic level. So thank you very much for inviting me along to talk about partnership working. I think what we have learned over the last couple of years, in particular, is that the Council cannot deliver its objectives in isolation. It needs to work collaboratively with its partners and with its communities. I know we all know that, but I think what the last couple of years have done has really reiterated that. Overall, we've been on a journey, I think, with our partnership working. If I think back to 5-6 years ago, you may remember we had a corporate peer challenge by the local government association. And one of the opportunities that were identified as part of that corporate peer challenge were really, to strengthen our strategic partnership working. What they felt was that the feedback from partners was that actually the council wasn't always there at the table. We weren't always engaged in some of those bigger conversations. So whilst our operational partnership working was really good at a service level, we didn't have that kind of overall I think relationship in place to develop that from a strategic point of view. So the title of the presentation is Working with the City for the City. That is now forms the basis of our council plan. So actually what you can see is actually there has been a shift. But I think you'll recognise that we are still on a journey. So next slide, please. So I mentioned COVID, and I think just in terms of setting the context, it's really important to recognise the last couple of years. It has been incredibly challenging. There has been, it's been an incredibly dynamic environment. But what it has done is really reinforce the need for partnership working. So everything we did during COVID, much of the COVID response was done in partnership with others. So if we look at our community hub, we worked really closely with Community Action Derby and our broader community and voluntary sector partners. From an economic recovery point of view, in terms of trying to get our city, back to being as vibrant as we can, we've done that by working with our city partners, with our local businesses. So what COVID really did was, I think it strengthened relationships at all levels. And we did, at that point, reintroduce what's called the Derby Partnership Board, which I'll come on to talk about. And really that board, it met monthly, virtually. It was city leaders, across Derby coming together to actually focus on what was important for the city. And at that point, it was responding to COVID. So whether it be the community hub, whether it be trying to get a vaccination centre up and running, there were various challenges that came up, I'm sure you'll remember. And really it's I think, galvanised, actually, the focus around partnership. So I think we've moved on. So, we put in place a recovery plan at that point. And, a number of achievements came out of that. So just in terms of the next slide. Thank you. So it led to things like our City of Culture bid. Derby putting in a City of Culture bid. We were longlisted for that. Really, really good partnership engagement. you know, led to us being, you know, kind of given some national profile. It also led to us being shortlisted and then awarded, you know, host city for the Great British Railway, which I know was discussed at council yesterday. And again, really, really positive achievement. But that's a team derby. You know, that overall is team derby and actually beyond, you know, working with some of our regional partners. In areas such as community safety, we now have a much better presence in terms of our city centre through the enforcement hub. And also we've done a lot of work in terms of the city centre around vibrancy. So one of the things that we introduced was the Marketplace Initiative. So at the time we were trying to support local businesses and, you know, encourage people to feel safe in terms of coming into the city. From a growth perspective also, you'll hopefully recognise the Smart Park development. So, you know, again, that's stemmed very much from the economic recovery partnership work that was done in terms of attracting investment into the city. And also, you notice the University Business School as well, which again, you know, it is part of that relationship building, you know, and actually giving confidence to partners to work with us and to you know, develop the city centre. So, moving on from that, what we've done in the last 18 months is very much tried to, I guess, cement this partnership working into some tangible priorities. So we developed these 4 themes, so in terms of being resilient, growth, green and vibrant, and these stemmed very much from the discussions that we were having with partners. We obviously went out and consulted on them, we linked them into our medium-term financial plan, they form the basis of our council plan, but for the first time in what feels like a while, we've actually got a sense of actually these are our shared priorities. And whether you be from the public, the private, you know, or the community or voluntary sector, I think a lot of partners in the city would identify with these. What we've also done is put in place a kind of an updated Derby plan, so a city plan that actually again reflects these priorities. And you know, I talked about the kind of I guess the vision that we have as part of the council plan, which is working with the city for the city. It's underpinned by a new way of working, which is better together. So councillors will recognise that from some of the you know, the work they're seeing in localities and neighbourhoods. But that approach around us working better, you know, not just internally but actually externally with our partners to achieve the outcomes that you know, local communities want to see. Next slide, please. So just to underpin those priorities, we agreed some city outcomes, and these are kind of, you know, embedded within our council plan. For each of these outcomes, we've agreed specific actions and indicators that show how we're going to measure that. So obviously we're still in the first year of that. The plan runs from 22 to 25. And obviously we need to adapt. I mentioned it's dynamic. We obviously need to put that in the context of the medium-term financial plan. So, you know, it's about being pragmatic, but overall having these shared goals that we are trying to work towards. Okay. Next slide, please. I mentioned the partnership board. So we did, I was going to say we kind of relaunched this in 2020. We did a more fundamental review of it last year because I think one of the opportunities we identified was to try and streamline some of the kind of boards and partnership boards and working groups that we had. So, for example, we at that point we paused the community and economic recovery groups, and actually we consolidated everybody into one board. So the board contains senior leaders from across the public, private, voluntary and community sector. It also contains group leaders and MPs. And actually, I mean, it's a really good group. I mean, we regularly get over 30 people attending, if not more. So we meet monthly, as I mentioned. Back in September, we held an away day. So we all met up at the Museum of Making. And it was really nice to meet face to face. We do meet face to face from time to time, but it was that opportunity to kind of, you know, I think come together. And what we talked about was, you know, the context, some of the challenges we're facing, but also some of the opportunities and actually how we can mitigate some of the risks that we all recognise across the board in relation to the the priorities that I talked about. We meet together physically sort of every 6 months, and in actual fact our next one is Friday. Next slide, please. So, a bit of a reflection, I guess, is overall how complex things can be. And if you hear Rachel North, our Deputy Chief Executive, she talks really articulately about this. But you know, I think as a local resident trying to navigate the range of services across public, private, and community voluntary sector, it's quite messy. It is messy, and certainly I think from a partnership point of view, we recognise that, and what we want to do is try and simplify things as much as possible. And I think we feel the best way we can do that is to work collectively together. Ultimately, that is the way we are going to impact for local people and recognise some of the interdependencies between our services. Certainly, you know, that's really evident from a locality point of view. And also, if you talk about things like health inequalities, the interdependencies between what we're all doing is really key. And some, for example, some of the areas that the Poverty Commission is looking at, and certainly from a cost of living point of view, we've also been looking at actually how we can, I guess, focus on what's important and actually make it as easy as we can for people to actually access our services, but also, where appropriate, help themselves, build on what is already in communities through a strength-based approach. So that is very much, I guess, the philosophy that we're following. So next slide, please. And then finally, I suppose it's just to kind of bring it together. In respect of that kind of messiness, we see the focus on the shared outcomes that we've agreed as the way forward. And yes, we're on a journey. Yes, I think there's more work to do, but actually, I think we've achieved an awful lot so far. And certainly, I think the feedback and the engagement that we get through Partnership Board is great. I think it's about collectively continuing to work towards the outcomes. And I think it's worth just saying, in terms of those outcomes, what we do is we report regularly into Cabinet and Exec scrutiny. So in terms of the monitoring reports that those committees see, they are getting regular information, because I think overall it's the difference that we can make collectively and sharing that. So I think that was it. Yeah, really happy to take any questions on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. It's really good to see a reminder of some of the great work that Team Derby has done. As was said, excuse me, last night, we don't often get thanks for the good stuff, so it's nice to see it. So thank you, Heather, for not only reminding us of the good stuff, but for leading on it too. And I certainly look forward to seeing what happens next on the journey. So I thought it was important for committee to see this, to see the good stuff that was happening. Do members of the committee have any comments or further recommendations? Philip and then Paul.
Just a comment, really. I mean, fine, good. Yeah, it quite clearly needs to link in with the council plan, with the medium-term financial plan, because hanging on its own it could be said to be just window dressing, and it's quite clearly not window dressing. It is something of the dynamic or document which is going to be moving forward. So the agreed outcomes seems to me to be quite the important thing. What are the agreed outcomes? And they need to be reviewed, and I'm sure they will be reviewed every now and then to say, well, yes, we've achieved it, no, we haven't achieved it, we've achieved it so much, we need to do a bit more in this area. So it's linked in with everything else that the council does, and all the other bodies as well, of course, but that's the difficult aspect, linking it in. You can and make it a dynamic document to actually do some improvements for the city. That's just a personal point of view. I mean, I've no axe to grind on this one. So.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, we those priorities and the outcomes are central to our council plan. We do regularly review them. We obviously, I mentioned the monitoring that we do, but I mean, for example, in terms of the medium-term financial, and the budget that went to full council just at the end of February, that did contain a review of our council plan, just so that everything in there is as realistic as it can be. But increasingly, due to the fluidity of the situation, I think those reviews probably need to be more often. I mean, certainly we do an annual delivery plan essentially, so we certainly look at it annually, and we tend to do a mid-year review as well. So I feel like we've got the mechanisms in place, to be honest, to review and just keep it up to date. but, you know, I think there's no doubt that given the circumstances, you know, that's even more important. But thank you for recognising.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very pleasing stage on quite a long journey we've been through as a council. As soon as our budget started to deplete, shall we say, in terms of government support, we realised that we needed to work with the voluntary sector. The voluntary sector were all not particularly, they didn't coalesce very well. They all had their own silos that they worked on. And what we've got is a general trend and a very rapidly increasing trend that these organisations work together. And that image of all those strands, which makes it look very complicated, we've actually changed that slightly because the strands are joining up into a more coherent kind of entity. And that has led to tremendous success in terms of all sorts of things. The Poverty Commission clearly values absolutely the work that's done by organisations, and I think basing it on the council plan and buying from all those organisations that is the way to work cohesively and coherently together, each with their own particular responsibility, because they have their own trustees, they have their own priorities. If they can merge better and they're getting good outcomes from their point of view, and the council is as well, then we're clearly on a tremendous road forward. So it's a great thing that the partnership board is working so well and the organisations are kept on board as well. So thanks.
Lucy and then Harjil.
Thanks for the update. I think it's really difficult because the idea of saying with the city, for the city. At the moment, the with the city, I think, is still working with other organisations in the city, not with the city's population per se. But a lot of the solutions, particularly in something like health and well-being, is actually needs to come through the individual people, or in terms of giving people the motivation to want to improve their education or whatever. It's the with has to be with individuals, not just with other organisations. And I feel that this is the challenging next step, as it were, to how to roll out from what's been achieved so far to do that. And part of that, as you've alluded to, is the importance of communicating. And communicating not just back to the council to see what is being done on our behalf and with us, but also out there, so that people can see the opportunities and understand some sort of coherence, as Paul said, as to pull those strands apart and show that there is the coherence and it isn't a tangled problem to get to where you want to go, but there are routes and people who can guide you if needed to do that. So I don't know if that's already identified as part of the vision going forward, but if it is, that would be great. There's also been talk of sub-boards, and particularly the Green Board, to be able to pick up with this, and you haven't said anything about that, and if there's more, including time frame and involvement and how that's supposed to be going, that'd be really interesting to hear.
I think, engagement is key, and I think we're already doing some of that already, but I think it is part of the next steps, and I think it's engaging in a maybe a different way to perhaps some of the formal ways in which we engage currently, and using some of the community networks that actually are already in place. I mean, I'm thinking specifically about kind of the alliances that I know exist, that are kind of facilitated by Community Action Derby. In some ways we can get closer to the community and actually understand need better through those kind of routes rather than through some of our formal means. But overall, it's about, it is about trying to be kind of open and two-way in terms of the way that we're communicating. So certainly, I feel we've demonstrated that really well through, for example, the work we've done on cost of living, where we have worked with them to, with a number of different groups and communities to develop our cost of living strategy and action plan. So, but I always recognise I think there's room for improvement there. In terms of the boards and working groups, I think we're on this is I guess part of the journey in terms of, I think, kind of trying to rationalise them where we can, and try and bring things together. And I know around the Green Board we have had some really good conversations over the last couple of months with the idea of moving the Climate Change Commission towards more of a kind of a green sustainability board. And actually that is one of the updates that we're going to update Partnership Board on Friday. But I think the intention is to do that quite quickly. So I know Chris Bussell, who's the chair of Climate Change Commission, will be communicating something shortly if he hasn't already about that. But yeah, certainly from a Green Board perspective, we're, you know, that we'll be setting that up very quickly. So.
For you, Chair, are there other boards being planned as well?
Yeah. In some cases, we're kind of tailoring them to what's already developed. So, for example, if we look at it from a vibrancy point of view, the two key outcomes we've got there linked to kind of city centre and to culture. So, from a city centre point of view, we already have a number of city centre kind of leadership groups that are already in place. Also, from a culture point of view, there's a culture derby board that's been developed. So we're kind of tailoring them to, so we're not being kind of, totally specific over the fact that we need a resilient board, or we need a green board, for example. It's kind of what is best to help deliver the outcomes, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, that is part of the work that we're doing, just in terms of kind of, rationalising and reviewing those boards to just try and make sure that actually they are focusing, we've got the right people involved, and ultimately they're focusing on the delivery that we need to improve outcomes. So.
Thank you. Yeah, it really looks good, and talking is always good.
Talking is good.
The partnership board. But just following up from Lucy's point about outcomes, is whether those conversations, the partnerships, the alliances end up with making a difference to our communities, to our residents, and the difference. And I'm sort of reminding myself and remind everybody here that when all of this work did happen, I mean, talking about culture, and we used to have cities of culture, city of this, we had different subgroups of strategic, we had all that. And what we had on top of that was better funding for our partners who are out in the community, particularly the voluntary sector, that enabled those boards to try to make an impact on the outcomes on the people in the communities. And in many ways, we're talking or describing, reinventing, reviewing with probably better articulation than probably has happened in the past, those areas. So, and you mentioned the Resilient Board, which sort of I attended. I mean, I don't know where we are with that, because there's not been any meetings, but again, the conversation there were all the partners around the table, the voluntary organisations in particular. The conversation still was about funding. There's so much you can do by talking and working in partnership, but sooner or later, it comes down to funding. You can maximise the resources you have, but if the total resources are not as they should be, then the impact's going to be that much less. So that's sort of a word of caution, really, in terms of where we are, and therefore it's really important to have those outcomes on the ground and what difference it makes. For example, health, the gap between the most well-off communities in Derby and the worst is not decreasing, it's like death. It's not decreasing, it's increasing. So, those are the sort of outcome parameters we need to really hone down on, and sort of use the positive talk, the positive conversations, the positive interactions that are happening to see, well, what difference does it make on that side. So that is, I mean, I don't know if you'd like to comment or respond on that, because that's really critical at the end of the day. And all of this, and Paul mentioned the Poverty Commission. well, it's all well capturing the lived experiences of people, majority of which we know, but the facts are there are inequalities, and what can we do about them? What are we able to do about them? And the Poverty Commission will evidence all that, and that's really good, but we'll still be saying then at the end of that, how are we going to make it happen to get rid of that, the poverty? And that's still a difficult challenge.
I think just in terms of the resources issue, you know, resources are always limited. Obviously, at the moment, they're even more limited. But I feel we're in a better place collectively to make the best use of the funding that we have. So, for example, around Household Support Fund, you know, we have very much been channeling that through, you know, to our community and voluntary sector. So, for example, the 51, you know, warm welcome hubs that have been set up. You know, so I think, you know, inevitably the resources question won't go away. I totally, you know, accept that. Inevitably, we're never going to have the amount of resources that actually we think we need. But I think, you know, collectively as a partnership, we can try and make the best decision in terms of, you know, linking it to our shared outcomes. So I guess that's how I would respond to the resources question. And I can't remember what I was what was the other point? One was resources and one was, I think, the sort of longer term inequalities issue. I guess in terms of achievements that we've seen to date, yes, they are short term. I would say in terms of, you know, but they are, you know, some of the things that have been in place. I mean, for example, culture. I mean, that's been quite a long burn. We know that actually our culture partners have been operating really well in the city for a while, and actually we have, you know, we've taken the opportunity to bid for City of Culture and got longlisted, and as part of that we are developing more of a culture derby offer that I think will stand the city in excellent stead and support, you know, overall vibrancy and growth that we want to see. In terms of some of the inequalities that we see, so from a socio-economic and a health point of view, they will take time to address. There is no doubt. But it is only through, I think, the monitoring and the evaluation of the actions that we're taking that we will know what works and how we can, you know, develop them further, which is obviously what the Poverty Commission is looking at. It's looking at, you know, lived experiences, what is actually causing, you know, what impact can we take. And I think as a partnership, if we're open to that learning and we keep our plans dynamic so that actually we react to those, I think that is the you know, the best way in which we will collectively, you know, deliver outcomes for the city. So those longer term challenges, they are definitely there. They are definitely in the council plan. You know, we very much recognise them. But I think, you know, in terms of how we deal with them, it is going to take time. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, it will take a lot of time because resources does make a difference, you know, so it will be long term. And I accept that we do the best we can with the resources we have. But I think it's just a reality check to say, well, and some of the things like helping people, you know, with warm places, and so, they're all symptoms of the tragic situation we've regressed into. So, you know, we've sort of gone back too far, and sort of what we're trying to do is sort of rescue people from a much further worse position than where we would have been or had been in the past with more resources. So, I mean, that's the reality check for me. So, you know, what we're doing is the best we can do with the resources and limitations, and the fact that we've gone so far back in terms of opportunity and inequalities of finance, of health, of all the things that are happening to our citizens. And I think what I would say is that the wider set of priorities that we're working towards, so for example, growth, you know, for example, green, they will contribute towards quality of health, quality of life in a longer term way. You know, it is about upskilling, you know, local people to actually get the higher value jobs, you know, in the same way as actually attracting investment in. So I feel, you know, we have got a balance between the kind of, you know, I think what we can do in the short term and with an eye on that longer term. But I think it's recognised in the context we're working in, you know, and actually it's challenging and it's dynamic, and but as a partnership, I feel we are well placed in terms of being able to respond to that, and I think that's probably the best that we can ask at this point.
Thank you, Heather. Paul, briefly, I've never, ever wanted to stifle debate in this committee, but I am looking at the time and knowing that we've got a whole heap of things still to get through. But yeah, briefly, Paul, thank you.
Just on health inequalities, the biggest beneficiary of that, of course, would be the NHS, and we now have the integrated work with us. Are the NHS directly involved in the partnership board?
Yes, they are. Yes.
That was brief. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Really appreciate it. You're free to leave if you need to, but also I know that you've got a bit of overlap over one of the next items. So item 9 is the 2022-23 inspections update, and Sarah is beaming at me from the back.
I am, thank you, Chair. So this was identified as an area for consideration as part of the development of the committee's work plan for this year. So the report provides an overview of our inspection and assurance activities, and when I say assurance, I mean independent external assurance as part of peer review and sector-led improvement activities. It looks on paper that we've had a relatively quiet year, so we've only had one, I suppose, what you would consider significant inspection over the last year, which is presented in paragraph 4.4 of Derby Adult Learning Service, where they were considered to be good across all of the judgment criteria with an overall effectiveness of good. But for completeness within the report, you will also see under paragraph 4.2 the outcome of the inspection of local authority children's services, where the report wasn't published until May of 2022. I think one of the most important aspects of the report is presented in 4.6, which sets out some of the developments in the regulatory framework that are on the horizon for local authorities. So not only are we seeing changes which we always see within the inspection frameworks that are in place, but we are seeing the introduction of increasing regulatory and inspection activity through consideration of adult social care services and also broader remits within children's services looking at unregulated accommodation. What I would say is that whilst this paper presents an overview of the outcome of inspections that have happened at a local authority level rather than a provider level, so it doesn't set out the outcomes of children's homes, our schools or any of our care providers, there is a system of activity, and it does feel very much like a system stroke industry of activity that sits behind this in terms of using inspections and assessments as a tool for development and improvement, with an absolute focus on the outcomes for the recipients of those services, whatever they may be. And that is something that I'm happy to talk about if required. But overall, I think that the inspections that have happened or have been published over the last year evidence the good outcomes that we are working together to achieve, both of those reflecting on the previous conversations in relation to the partnership board, absolutely have been dependent upon partnership working at a strategic and operational level to deliver those best outcomes for the city and for children and adult learners in those cases. And work is well underway on planning for the horizon moving forward with some of our new and emerging inspection frameworks. And although the report doesn't document it, we do have regular correspondence with inspectorates, so we have annual conversations with Ofsted that will review and consider the progress that we're making in terms of the delivery of our improvement plans. So whilst this provides a high-level update on the outcomes of inspection, there is a lot of activity that happens in terms of making sure that it's used as a tool, not just as a framework to respond to, but also using the outcomes of inspection to deliver improvements. And I know that they've been reported through to previous committees, and they're also included within our performance monitoring, and is something that we're very passionate about ensuring we deliver against. I'm happy to take any questions or any areas that colleagues would like to see represented in the report next year, where I suspect there'll be a lot more detail because there are a few inspections on the horizon.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it, and appreciate the report because it's really nice to read and easy to digest. Members of committee, any questions? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Can I just pick up with you the point you made about this not reflecting the individual schools, care homes, etc. reports? does somebody consolidate such reports and provide internal reviews of what has been identified to relevant people within the relevant department?
So in terms of the maintained schools, so I take them in turn, maintained schools are considered as part of a performance measure, which is reported through in Doris and is considered as part of our regular performance monitoring, and that's been in place for many years. What I would say is as part of the academisation, actually that shifted the balance, but we will always look, when we are looking at outcomes for our children and young people, around the overall performance of schools. So you will see national publications and benchmarking that's available through My Derby that looks at that and collates it and compares it together. In terms of our care providers, that has been considered just recently in readiness for work we're doing around the adult social care, inspection preparation, and is featured within our self-assessment, and that's considered by senior leaders and reported through to relevant individuals. And in terms of our children's homes, we consider that as part of our overall framework for improvement for children's services. So it is reflected within the conversations we have with Ofsted as appropriate. It is considered from a placement perspective in terms of outcomes for children, and those specific reports go through to Corporate Parenting Committee where they're considered. So there are forums for all of these areas to be considered and appropriately responded to, and we ensure that we try and harness the outcomes of those from a recommendations perspective and filter them back through. So we have undertaken sector-led improvement discussions around children's homes previously as part of our development journey. So we always ensure that we try to keep that insight to shape the developments that we need to deliver going forward. So, yes. That was a long answer, but hopefully an assuring one.
Any other comments? Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks, for that. Just one question, really. Just following on, the maintained schools versus the academies. I know our role is to look at what we do in the council, and you say there probably is benchmarking. Do we have an understanding of how we perform, the maintained schools are performing versus the non-maintained or academies which are in the city? Do we have that sort of information? Do we use that as a benchmark?
Yeah, we do have that information, unfortunately, and I'm disappointed to say that I haven't got those figures in my brain at the moment, because I normally do, but I haven't got that to hand. But it's all reported through and is available on My Derby, and I think this is one of the areas where the consideration through forums such as the Partnership Board and what was previously the Opportunity Areas, which is obviously moved on, provides that broader perspective around outcomes for children and the adequacy of learning, and within that there's broader consideration of things such as exclusions, which we report through as our framework. So we try and ensure that we align all of the risk areas to our general performance monitoring and then consider the overall impact of that. And that is an area that has also been considered historically through our annual conversations with Ofsted, where there has been a focus on learning alongside early help and social care. And they will consider all schools in a local area, not just maintained.
Just, I mean, not now, but if it is possible to share that information with me, that'd be really helpful outside the meeting.
Sarah is nodding and giving the thumbs up, so I'm sure she will do that quite promptly. Any other questions or comments on this item? No? Super. Thank you, Sarah. And it is over to you again for item 10 for the risk management strategy and the beautiful, beautiful handbook, which I've already praised you for, but I will do so publicly because I think it's wonderful. And Alison, if the annual governance statement falls on you going forwards, this might give you a flavour of some of the beauty that the committee has come to expect. No pressure. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. You know I like to make things pretty and accessible. What I would say to start with the presentation of this report is it's absolutely been a journey that I think the committee have been on with us. So I am hoping, as I run through some of the highlights, there are going to be absolutely no surprises around some of the developments that we've made in updating the handbook and also the strategy. So obviously the committee have been part of this with us for many years, and I've had the pleasure of coming at least every 6 months to provide an overview of the development activity we've been doing to strengthen our overall risk management framework and the assurance that that is providing us both from a threats perspective but also an opportunity perspective, recognising that we've done a lot of work to try and present that balanced overview. So the report presents the committee with the updated risk management strategy and the supporting handbook. These were delayed slightly, as I mentioned in the January meeting, to make sure that we could align with the medium-term financial plan, particularly in relation to risk appetite, recognising that whilst the boundaries provide the scope for consideration of risk appetite, it's really important, reflecting some of the conversations that have already taken place today, that we are as up to date and in line with our thinking so that there's consistency of understanding and message from a variety of different sources. So if I just present the committee with some of the highlights that we've made in terms of the development of the documents. But before I do that, I would say that this has absolutely, alongside members of the committee, which I feel have very much shaped some of the developments that we've made, it's also been shaped by our senior leaders, it's been shaped by our corporate risk management group, it has been shaped by the outcomes of internal audit and activities and findings that are coming through that route, and also our project manager network. So there's been a lot of consultation on the developing documents. And whilst they are in place for at least the next 2 years, what I would say is that as we continue to report through on a 6-monthly basis, we will continue to seek to strengthen and develop things. So if there are things that are not clear, or if there are gaps in guidance that are required, we will absolutely respond to those. So the risk management strategy provides a very succinct, I hope, overview of where we are in relation to risk management as an organisation, how we define risk, which has been broadened out in response to the outcomes of our internal audit on risk management. We have refreshed the roles and responsibilities contained within the strategy to not just strengthen some of them, but also to reflect some of the developments that we've made in other areas and ensure that we've got absolute alignment. And we are, whether as a head of service or a manager, whether you're looking at the leadership accountabilities or our programme and project management roles and responsibilities, you're getting a consistent understanding of what the expectation is from a risk management perspective. We have also included within the document, and it's at a high level position because obviously the handbook is where you find further information, our risk appetite boundaries. And again, these have been developed with senior officers. We've discussed them with heads of service. We had a session with Cabinet, and we had our external risk consultant Zurich facilitating that process. We had a survey that was completed prior to the establishment of our general risk appetite boundaries, so they are present. And what I would say is they are set against a number of risk categories. There is always within the framework areas where you could challenge things being presented differently, but overall this gives a really robust framework to empower people to take risks or not, in line with where we want to seek to take risks. And there is, as was presented to the committee in January, an initial assessment of our risk maturity, which we will revisit at least annually as we seek to develop and embed our risk appetite boundaries, making sure that it is shaping the right conversations and the right discussions in the right forums. So that's a very quick overview of the strategy. In terms of the handbook, there's been a lot of development within this document, and it's actually, when you look at the number of pages, it is a lot of pages, but there's a lot of supporting information in there. It is absolutely intended to be your go-to guide from a risk management perspective as an individual working within Derby City Council or as a councillor within Derby City Council seeking to know more about how we identify risk, how we classify risk, how we record risk, how we escalate and de-escalate risk. So it takes you through each of the stages of our risk management framework and set out in paragraph 4.6. I'm not going to go through all of the points and changes we've made or some of the highlights that we've developed. Again, some of these have been taken and actioned in response to the findings of the internal audit. So all of those recommendations, I'm pleased to say, given the conversation at the start of the meeting, I hope have been responded to and will be appropriately closed. And also there are elements such as partnership, risk monitoring and management that we are seeking to strengthen within the guidance, recognising the developments we're making in other areas of our activity. So obviously presented in 4.7 is the response to the internal audit recommendations. And there is, I think the only other thing that I would draw the committee's attention to is that there is more of an extensive guide to risk appetite set out in Appendix 6 of Appendix 2. So it's the final appendix of the risk management handbook, and I would encourage colleagues to read that and look at that. I think it provides the detail that sits behind those risk boundaries and provides the narrative that will support our colleagues when making decisions and using it as a tool to challenge and appropriately progress opportunities or respond to threat as required. And again, there is more guidance around definition of risk appetite, etc. within there. I'm more than happy to take any questions. We've done a lot around risk assurance through the 6 monthly monitoring report, so I'm not proposing to go through that in any detail, but there are more tools available within the handbook as we try to seek to promote risk owners to do more assurance-based activity in addition to what we facilitate through the assurance team. But it's just a big thank you to everybody that's been involved in this, and I'm hoping that it's received positively by the committee, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sarah. I hope it is taken positively. And just to echo the thanks to all that have been involved in this. There are a lot of pages to these documents, but they are, I hope everyone will agree, very easy to read. And I hope that for the people who need to use these documents, that they will also agree. I think it's been great to have that reminder that risk is an opportunity as well as a threat. And it's great to see so many of the discussions that we've had through the committee over recent months, years, feed into these documents. So, members of the committee, any comments, questions? Councillor Kerr and Councillor Hasselgrave.
I sort of look back to when we had first training. It must be probably 4 or 5 years ago, when we had people coming in to talk to us about risk, and we were all novices. I just think that this is just an illustration of how much things have changed and how much the thinking has been embedded within the organisation. So, and things like this help give it coherence and structure. So this is really nitpicking, and I apologise for this, but in the contents we've got numbers for the introduction for risk management progress for risk management matrix. Could we reflect those numbers in the document, and the same for the handbook, just to make it easier to navigate? Because as you say, it has quite a lot of pages. Because it's online and not printed, it shouldn't be too wasteful or anything.
Absolutely, and we'll add hyperlinks in as well, so you can just go to those. So I think
yes,
anything that makes it user-friendly, happy to take that feedback, so thank you.
And the other thing I was going to ask is, well, 2 other things. One is whether you've done any work with Derby Homes and their risk discussions. There's no reference to them here, but I just wondered if there'd been liaising on that.
Yep, so if I can respond to that, I am in conversations with Derby Homes, so their risk framework is up for consideration. I think it was up for consideration in January. They have delayed it to ensure we can align with our risk management framework, and I actually sent an email to Derby Homes yesterday setting out these documents and asking for a conversation to make sure, because there will be elements that are specific to Derby Homes. The roles and responsibilities, for example, would need to be more tailored to their own governance, but set within our wider council framework. So that piece of work is underway. So I can provide that assurance that it is happening, and that will be coming in the not too distant future through their governance.
Okay, it's good to know that we're aligned and sharing knowledge and so on. And the final thing is on training. I looked back at the version of councillor training that was circulated a few weeks ago for post-election, and I couldn't see risk management on that training. And I just think that maybe we ought, as a committee, to ask that there is a training, expectation of training within that programme, given that we've said here that we're doing it. So that would be a recommendation, Chair, that we put forward to, presumably Democratic Services are coordinating it.
Paul, you would like to speak? Would anybody like to second Lucy's recommendation?
Well, I'd just like to go a bit further and maybe amplify that. Looking at kind of all the kind of people involved in corporate risk management group, councillors have a responsibility, but they're not on it. Lead cabinet members for their area go to it. Isn't the time now to say we ought to have, as a councillor, a risk champion as a councillor, right, who would attend corporate risk management group?
The portfolio holder, I think.
It is the portfolio already, yeah, but shouldn't, if we've got if we appoint a champion for risk, along with quite a lot of other champions as a councillor, you would give them the role of attending that corporate risk management group anyway, because it would be meaningless otherwise. And I think it would raise the profile among councillors. And I agree absolutely with Lucy that there should be some training for councillors on that, because it needs to permeate the whole of the council, elected members and officers. And, you know, this concept of risk appetite, which really needs to be explained to councillors, because clearly some directorates will have virtually zero tolerance of risk. You know, children's services, anything statutory, I would imagine. Whereas in other areas, there are opportunities through taking risk, and they're worth exploring. So I'd definitely support Lucy's suggestion. But I think we ought to add this idea of flying the kite of maybe having a councillor who's the risk champion, whether that would make sense to councillors and thinking, what does that mean? But that would need to be explained, I think.
Thank you, Paul. I think it certainly makes sense to me, but then, as you say, you know, we're a little bit biased on this committee of different things. I mean, we have a fraud champion, and it has been me for the last couple of years as the chair of this committee. The risk champion, I think, would be possibly ideally placed to be the chair of the committee or the cabinet member with responsibility for, as lots of our champions are predetermined by other roles. But I don't see any negatives to that, so I'd quite happily support that recommendation. Are other members of the committee in agreement with the recommendations put forward? So in terms of the training aspect that Councillor Kerr has mentioned, and in terms of having a risk champion? Anybody against such things? Councillor Jennings, I was going to say, you look like you've got something to say.
Yeah, I have. I'm just a little bit confused in my own mind what the role of the risk champion would be and how that could be identified widely to attract people to that role.
Maybe if councillors got training, they would see. We could.
That's my point. I think the training. Make my point is we need to get baby steps, and I think we need the training first.
Yeah. Okay, so a recommendation. Sorry, Paul.
Wouldn't have to be at the AGM. It could be as a result of councillors saying this is important. We need a risk. We need a champion.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that just because it's not maybe at the AGM in May that it isn't at the AGM next May. So a recommendation then of training as suggested by Councillor Kerr with a view to potentially having a risk champion going forward. Yeah? Everybody happy with that? Councillor Dinson?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have champions, but I'm not. Depends. I mean, if there's a distinct role of risk in a portfolio or some other role, like the chair of this committee, then it's more difficult to sort of look at risk champion from the sort of group of councillors who are not in a role. So exploring that would be better rather than sort of making it definitive, because we need to really understand what that could add
I think that's
already
a good
existing
suggestion.
structures.
Heather has a hand up behind you.
Hello, sorry, just to chip in here. I suppose I think it's a good suggestion. I do think all councillors should be risk champions, because in a way, you know, decisions that are taken by cabinet and challenged by, you know, and reviewed by overview and scrutiny committees and committees such as this, I think that broader training for councillors is absolutely right. If I'm being honest, in terms of the risk champion role, I see that probably sitting more with the portfolio holder, which is currently the arrangement that we have. However, through the training, you know, through the sort of wider discussion, I'm really happy to kind of, you know, discuss the opportunity of a broader risk champion. But you know, where we are currently, I think it sits with the portfolio holder.
Thanks, Heather. So to get Dom to get his Tipex out yet again, if we add a recommendation to this that risk training for all councillors be included wherever that sits.
In the schedule for post-election?
Yeah, somewhere in the schedule, because I mean I know that's already been drafted and somewhat approved. But yes, it should be added into it, because it would also give people a bit more of an understanding and maybe a little bit more of a awareness of this committee. And as I said last night, it's more fun than it sounds. Richard's not seen that bit yet. So yeah, so he has? Yeah. Okay. So a recommendation then that risk training be mandatory for all councillors going forward, and for that training to be worked into the training schedule. Yes? Are we happy with that? Yep. Do we want to add in the bit about risk champions, or do we want to take advice from Heather that sits with the portfolio holder and that's maybe something to take up next year? Or
yeah, I would hold on to that thought rather than
so just the training to be mandatory to all councillors. Yes? Yeah, everybody? Okay.
Yes, with the training.
Super. We will add that recommendation. We will therefore approve the strategy and handbook, and note that a report on risk assurance will be submitted to the committee in July. And we will thank Sarah and all involved in this beautiful document. So, item 11, Richard sat there very quietly for a very long time. Item 11, committee terms of reference.
Unusual for me to be quiet, Chair, but never mind. Yes, committee terms of reference. One of the best practices to review the committee's terms of reference on a regular basis, particularly so as SIPFA, as you see from 4.2 of the report, SIPFA brought in last October an updated practical guidance on audit committees for local government and for police authorities. So at the beginning of March, Chair, Councillor Jennings, Councillor Kerr and Philip Sunderland and myself got together to review the terms of reference that we had previously and the model terms of reference that were in this nice new document, and we've come up with the terms of reference now that are in Appendix 1. You can see what we've done there. There's some, what SIPFA had done is they'd moved a few things around, so we followed suit because it actually flowed better in the terms of reference in our opinion at the meeting. But all the items in red in Appendix 1 are the areas that we have amended or moved around. I think the key thing for you to consider, those members that weren't on the working group, is that what we need to try and reflect is the SIPFA position statement on audit committees, which I've reproduced at Appendix 2, and that'll help you assist in that to identify whether you feel that the terms of reference meet that position statement. As a working group, we felt that it did, and so what we put is Appendix 1 for you to have a quick review of and hopefully approve.
Thanks, Richard. I will open this to members of the committee, though a good chunk of you are on the working group with me. Does anybody have any comments? Anything that looks like it shouldn't be there, or anything that you think should be there? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. When we take the redness out of this thing, could we take the word by out, which is duplicated on number 35? Otherwise, absolutely fine.
Thanks, Lucy. Anybody else? Any comments? I mean, we thought this was the best that it could be. Nobody seems to have anything else to say, so I will assume everybody is happy with that. Yes, they are. Well done, Richard. Item 12 then is the internal audit charter.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, this is something we bring to each year. Basically, what the internal audit charter is to provide the City Council, we use the same charter across CMAP, so it's really, we just make one or two little tweaks where slight differences, but it's basically to provide the City Council with a blueprint for how internal audit will operate and helps you as the Audit and Governance Committee to signal the value it places on internal audit's independence. And that's the intriguing thing, the word independence is in there. If I'm going to be brutally honest, I'll say that there are no changes from the one I brought to you last year, which you all seem to love, and so hopefully you'll love it again this year.
Thanks, Richard. And yeah, I think it's nice to have this as a standalone item. It brings it, gives it a little bit more priority, I suppose. Does the committee love it as much as last year? Councillor Hazelgrave.
Just on accountability arrangements 43, that idea we've had earlier about how we kind of draw out and present the fact that we have added value over the year. In that report, could we put some wording about that? Is there a word for effectiveness somewhere in there? Yeah, here it is. So under that idea of effectiveness, if we're being effective, we're adding value. So we're adding that, yeah? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Anything else from members? No, everybody does love it as much as last year, Richard. Excellent work. So we review and approve that. Item 13. See, Richard stays quiet for ages and then gets his own show. Item 13, Internal Audit Progress Report.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hopefully I can share this with a few others. Just to quickly go over the progress report itself, the key things there I'd like to point out. We are moving forward as quickly as we can do to try and get as many audits finished from the 22-23 audit plan that we possibly can. There are some hold-ups, mainly because of getting hold of officers and getting information. Still one or two areas I'm not completely satisfied with, that we are moving as quickly as we can, but we're dealing with that. And as the Chief Exec said earlier as well, not just with the recommendations, but hopefully when I go and do these talks to CLT, etc., I'll be able to get across the need to not just to get recommendations implemented, but also to liaise with internal audit as we're trying to do the work as well. It's not just a Derby City thing, it is across the partnership, we noticed this. But moving on then to audit coverage, see that the 6 audits that we finished since the last time we reported to the January meeting, 4 of those have been rated as reasonable assurance. There are 2 areas that we haven't actually given assurance ratings to because that wasn't that type of audit. You will notice under strategic communications there is a risk accepted audit, and this seems to, from risk accepted recommendation, this seems to be something that's happening a lot more regularly now. We're getting risk accepted, and I think it will continue. We haven't had any for a long time that we have to report through to you. Then suddenly in the last 3 meetings, I think I've brought a risk accepted recommendation to you each time. Again, as I say in the covering report on that, there are. It's all about off-contract spend, basically. But I feel from what we've received back from management in their response that you can see in 4.4 that they are dealing with things. They are making sure that there's regular negotiations with the supplier and that value for money is being obtained by the council. They also go on to say that alongside this work is already underway with business support colleagues to undertake a print contract framework. So I'm getting the assurance from that things are as they should be. So I'm happy that it was risk accepted. To go back to the audit document, the progress report again, not too much I want to say on the other audits. really want to focus more on the recommendations. And I know that we've had 3 areas where we've had significant risk recommendations for some time, being the bus station, bereavement services and neighbourhoods. You asked for this meeting for officers to attend, to update you on all of those. Unfortunately, we haven't got anybody for the bus station. The head of service for the bereavement services is currently unwell, but I have spoken to him, so I can update you on that. I know Charles is here on neighbourhoods, and he's been sat patiently for a few hours, so I shall hand over back to the committee so that for them to get an update from Charles.
Thanks, Richard, and thank you, Charles, for sitting patiently. But if you are able to provide the committee with an update, that would be much appreciated.
Thanks, Chair, and it is a very brief update. So, as the Chair says, my name is Charles. I'm Head of Community Safety and Locality Working, which is our new term for what is described in this recommendation as neighbourhood working. The recommendation was linked quite heavily to the constitutional review that's been undertaken. So the structure of neighbourhood boards, forums and ward committees, including the way that decisions have been made or will be made and therefore recorded, were considered as part of that review that was conducted by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. I understand the findings of that review have been very recently shared with group leaders and a specific councillor working group. Members, so throughout that review, members demonstrated a clear appetite to retain a means to allocate funding for their wards, but it has been recommended that a new system of community funding is introduced that is separate to the existing structure of constituted meetings. As you'll know, boards, forums and committees are within our constitution and therefore quite heavily have quite a significant amount of governance around them. We'll be working with Democratic Service colleagues to consult with members more widely and ensure that a more efficient model is reflected in the new constitutional arrangements that ensure that the recommendations are met, as well as the needs of councillors and our communities. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Members of the committee, any questions for Charles on that item? Otherwise, we can let him escape. Lucy.
I wondered if you could give a bit more idea of timescale for this.
I'd hope largely for very recently after post-election, so we're probably aiming for around that May-June time for implementation of that.
Anything else from the committee? No? Thank you for attending. Thank you for sitting patiently for a very short presentation, but it is much appreciated. And yeah, we as a committee will look forward to seeing sort of implementation of that soon after the elections. Richard, if you're able to give the update on behalf of Doug.
I am, Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, I had a chat with Doug yesterday. Key thing from internal audit's point of view when we did the audit were the key risks to us were around the fact that there was old cremators and it was old facilities, and it was where the resilience lies. And members will remember when Doug came last time that he did say that they have now got resilience with a standalone cremator. They have got emergency cover in place as well with other crematoriums. And what Doug was telling me yesterday is they've actually been taking in cremations from other crematoriums, so it's actually working the other way at the moment. He's happy that they're proactively keeping the cremators going through a maintenance programme, which was one of the audit recommendations anyway, that we felt that there needed to be some sort of maintenance programme in place. However, one of the things that Doug did say was that going forward, the council needs not only to consider the crematorium, but also the future for burial provision as well. So one of the things is now that we have been reporting through to you that the report, etc., around cremator and replacement of the cremator and that sort of stuff had been put on hold because of financial issues. Doug informs me now they're going back to the drawing board to look at what options are available to the service going forward. But also one of the things he has been talking about is green technology, and then that needs to be considered within the review and what the options are available around that as well. So probably quite timely it's going back to they can have another review on it as well. So that was really, in a nutshell, what Doug had said to me.
Thanks, Richard. Difficult to quiz Richard on the bereavement services thing, but I understand why Doug couldn't be here today. Any questions that anybody thinks Richard may be able to answer, or any questions that we can put forward to Doug, or are we just happy to accept the update for now and appreciate the many constraints around this area? Happy? Can I suggest that we ask Nigel Bryant to attend the next committee to give an update on bus station? Because again, it's something that has trickled over from many years. And before before I hand over to the committee for the rest of it, Richard, I asked at the pre-meet if there was any update on the CareLink item. The revised date for that was end of November last year. My question for the rest of the committee was just whether that was whether there was a lack of staff available to be able to implement the recommendations, and if it was something like that, or if there was an easy answer, whether we could just revise the revised date so that this didn't keep flagging up as almost 6 months out of date.
Yes, I've followed that up, Chair. Not had an answer yet. I've not been able to get hold of anybody on that. So what my proposal is as soon as I get an answer, I will circulate it around the committee anyway. But if not, it might be something that the committee wish to consider at their June meeting to perhaps call it in, as it's been outstanding for some time. Along as well with the, you'll probably notice, I know it's a low risk one, but the welfare reforms has been sat here for a couple of years now. It might be again worth getting something on that as well.
Members of the committee?
I'd be happy to call them both in.
If we can arrange that for the June meeting, that would be super. Any other comments, questions from members? Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the summary sheet at the beginning is much more legible this time than it has been. So whatever tech you're using, thank you.
Dom and I had a quick chat about it, and Dom's worked his miracles on it.
Any other comments? No? Everybody seems quite happy with that. I feel like it will be back to you for, yes, item 14, internal audit plan, quarter 1, Richard.
Events earlier in the meeting will mean we'll have to revisit part of the plan anyway. But the key thing for quarter 1, as always, and this is the advantage of doing quarterly planning, is that we do. In the good old days, audits were done every, this is a yearly plan. Now we can spread it across, so it's a rolling plan. So we will have a lot of items brought forward from quarter 4 that are still ongoing into quarter 1 anyway. There are key areas that we need to make sure that we are looking at, particularly the new financial management system. We want to keep working on that one, and we're working closely with accountancy on that one and the implementation team. The insurance claims handling, we need to, we've got 2 audits in there. We're still working with legal on how they're going to implement the actual claims handling. So we were hoping that this year we'd be looking at next year we'll be looking at the actual embedding of the process, but we're still working with them on that. So that's a key area. Debt management is another area that I've promised the head of service there that we'll do work on as it's transferring across into business support. Records management is a key area that I've always had an interest in, and again, it's something that we need to get give assurance on at the council. Things like National Fraud Initiative are areas that come around every couple of years, and it's something that, as an audit, we get involved in, as does Tracy Thomas from the corporate fraud team. Absence monitoring is certainly an area we need to have a look at and to give assurance around that. The long-term waste management project is still ongoing, so again, it's one of the things that committee asked us to be involved in, so we'll continue that until then. Areas around trading standards and compliance with statutory functions and pest control are areas that we've agreed with their heads of service there that we'll pick up. And in people services, one of the areas that I'm quite keen to look at is the safeguarding the role of the local authority designated officer, the LADO, and see how we've had a change in LADO again. So again, picking up that and seeing how that give assurance to the committee that that's working as intended. Hannah, who's with us, sits on the one of the boards for the adult social care transformation, so we're getting involved in that as well. And then residential care is an area we've not looked at for a long time, so that's something else we need to have a look at, I think, in Q1. And then, of course, there will be the work we need to do around Anthony Hall and the park there. Then there are all the cross-cutting things, such as the assurance framework, governance framework, the savings programme in the medium-term financial plan and the risk around that we want to pick up. Grant certification, which is clearly an area that's expanding now that we get heavily involved in. I'm required to sign off a lot of the grants now with the chief executive. I have to give assurance that the grants have been spent in the way they were intended. Again, risk management, IT contingency, fraud contingency are all areas that we need to be involved in. We're still going to be doing work around contract management, but we've got a contingency plan in place for that one. And any new systems or changes to existing systems should come through internal audit if there's changes to controls and things like that. Going forward, we've identified a number of areas for quarters 2 to 4, as you can see there. I won't go through all of them, but one of the things that we do need to think about as well is, of course, is the East Midlands evolution. And once we know what the risks are around that, then that's something else we'll need to have a look at to see how it impacts the council, not the combined authority as it is, because that's another thing, but what the risks are for the council going forward. One of the things I did want to draw committee's attention to in the main body of the report is that one of the things, as you know, with the medium-term financial plan, is that one of the savings is around the contribution that council makes to CMAP. And in 4.11 there I explained that it's going to be an £83,000 reduction in contribution, which has a knock-on effect to the amount of work that we can do. I don't normally quote days because they're an input and I prefer to talk about output, but it just gives you some idea there as to the number of days that it will mean. It's taking us back to the level we were at in 2015-16 when the external auditors commented they didn't feel that the council were purchasing enough internal audit. So it's something we need to bear in mind as we go through that. It will have an impact on CMAP as a whole, and Councillor Heselgrave was involved in the CMAP board discussions on that area, but it will have a knock-on effect across the partnership rather than not only just Derby City Council. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. I mean, I was also going to draw committee's attention to the detail at 4.11 and 4.12 and the concerns that I have and the concerns that I will probably not be able to address going forwards. But the reduction of audit days, it does leave us with potential governance issues going forwards. Councillor Heselgrave, is there anything that you would like to add to this following your fine representation on the CMAP board when neither myself or the Vice Chair were available to attend?
No, I don't think I do have anything to add, and I think we all would share concerns about the reduction of the number of audit days, but at the end of the day you can only cut your coat according to the cloth you've got, and hopefully that will be eased and you'll get a more substantial coat in the future.
Thanks, Paul. Do any other committee members have any questions, queries, comments?
Oh, I started on. Just a couple of queries. On page 5, we've got absence monitoring to review the council's absence monitoring arrangements and ensure they're being used effectively to manage colleague absences. I would just like to be more positive and to have that saying manage colleagues' attendances, because I think it's actually attendance that we're wanting. So if we can look at it in that light when we're scoping for it, I think it might just change the way we're looking at it, because I think we want people to be there rather than to. Can you see the difference?
I can, Councillor Kane. It is something. I mean, it's just the way we phrased it there, but
yeah.
Attendance management is what we'll be looking at.
Yeah, but we want people to be there rather than to work out why they're not. And in schools of contingency on page 6, it says to consider the council's response to the government's launch of the National Drug Strategy and provide assurance regarding the council's role in drug treatment measures in the local area. How does that fit in with schools contingency?
That was an oversight. Somehow that's got in there. We've changed it now. On Steam, it actually says schools financial value standards.
Oh, it's an error.
It's an error.
Okay,
yeah,
that's fine.
It was somehow that we've done the National Drug Strategy audit in Q4, and that's now finished. And it was just an error. Somehow that got into that cell. Fortunately, Hannah spotted that for me yesterday, and we were able to get onto Dom and change that on the portal.
Happy with that, Lucy?
Yep, that's fine, thank you.
Could you turn your mic? It's because you can't see it. Glaring red light my side, but you can't see it at all. Councillor Hazelgrave.
Just on that issue of absence monitoring and how we term it, you know, there's obviously been a lot of working home during COVID, and I think there's been a trend where that's continued, and it's a good way to continue in terms of the fact that people can work as effectively from home on some things than actually physically in the building. And has that had an influence on absence rates, in the sense that people are saying, I'm too ill to work today, whether it's from home or in the building? It's just a wider question about, you know, what the impact of working from home is, and does it actually mean people do put a day's work in where, in the old days, when they had to physically be in the building, that was beyond them, but they can just about manage at home.
Can I pick that one up, Chair? From a CMAP point of view, we've been doing home working for a long time. The one thing we had never had was the Teams and Skype to enable us to converse with each other. But because we've got so many sites, we've got offices at other councils, one of the things we found is that people tend to, you know, if they're feeling a bit under the weather, they just work from home and they're still working, so they're not absent as such. And quite a few of our staff have gone down with COVID during the last few years, and they've continued to work but from home because they can do so. They'd rather not come in and spread the disease, the virus to people, and work from home. One of the things we'll be looking at as part of the audit is, you know, what is the effect of hybrid working? Has it made attendance monitoring, I'll use the word attendance monitoring, better? So it will form part of the audit.
Anything else from committee members? No? Super. I do hope the committee will provide internal audit with the support that we have given over recent years, particularly in the terms of the cuts that have been discussed. But thank you for that, Richard, and have fun juggling the plan. Now we've given you something else to do. Item 15 is the audit planning report. I referenced this earlier. There's a lovely line on the first page of this that says they welcome the opportunity to discuss the report with us today. That's clearly not happening. What I would like from a committee is some guidance. Would you like to have any sort of discussion on this, or would you like to send any questions that you have on this straight through to Dom for him to forward on to EY? Given there's nobody here that can directly answer questions in that report, I don't want to keep putting lots of things onto Richard, and it's certainly not his place to answer them. So what would committee rather? Philip?
Just from my personal point of view, I started going through this thing and I thought got to a page and a half of notes, and I, having have a thought when I went back to it, I thought, well, is there really any point? Talking to Alison before the meeting, you know, we are where we are. we can't do anything much about it. There's some there's some errors in there. There's a number of repetitions. It's outdated. Some of the materiality misstatements are a bit bizarre. Some of the comments they make are a bit strange, but you know, and they want to double the audit fee. You know, so you know, all these things are questions that I would like to be answered and respond to. But no, I suspect nobody here can do that. I noticed just on the audit fee that we've declined to give them the increase. I assume that's still the case. But you know, I would like to go through it line by line, do it page by page, but I can't really see the point, quite frankly. You know, it's poor. Were the relationship continuing, I would have thought. Well, I say I would recommend it. Maybe not. As Dom's reminding me, it's not my position to recommend things, but that we do a strongly worded complaint to whoever about the attitude, the way things have happened, the way things haven't happened, and the absence of anybody from the firm. If Hassan can't make it, why can't somebody else come along? You know, I mean, you know, there's all sorts of ifs, buts, whys, and wherefores. It's appalling. I was chair of an audit committee on a housing association some years ago, and we required them to come to every meeting. You know, that ought to be a standard thing. We've not seen them for 18 months? Well, whatever. So, you know, I'm not sure where we go from here. I mean, I'll see what other members vote, but I can't see the point of me going through my queries here, to be honest, Alison. I mean, I'd like to, but, you know, so it's most unsatisfactory.
I'm just wondering, Councillor West, as a last-ditch attempt, whether I know there will be a different configuration of the audit committee in the next June meeting, but we will still be heavily in the process. It won't be out of date at that point. We won't have had all these statements signed off, whether that is probably a pragmatic solution if I have a word with EY and again articulate the disappointment and give them one more opportunity to come to the June meeting to discuss the plan.
Could somebody else?
I can suggest that. I can arrange to talk to him and you know, express our disappointment and our expectations and give them that last opportunity. Suggestion.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. And Harvey, I'll come to you in a second, because, yeah, I mean, this is it. In all my previous years on the committee, we've always had somebody from external audit attend the meetings. Sometimes they've not been in the whole of the meeting and they've been pacing the corridors on their phone. But when they've been in the meeting, they've at least given us their full attention. But I can think of, I think probably every year that I've been a member of this committee, I have flagged with EY a number of very small errors, but, you know, errors indeed, that have slipped through, things that have come through clearly from other committees, from other councils, you know, wrong names of things, and it just adds to my frustrations that we're not given the priority that this council deserves. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be happy with that suggestion, Alison. I think they do need to attend and face committee. Councillor Jennings.
I think you've covered it all, Chair. The only thing the only other thing that I was thinking about was how can we potentially warn other local authorities against employing them in the first place?
Social media. Councillor Kerr.
Just say, I'm really sad that we're in this position. I feel that, you know, we don't want to question the professionalism of our external auditors, because we're so dependent on the fact that they are going to do a job for us, and we don't want to fall out with them because we want them to do a good job for us. But if we had additional internal audit capacity, I'd almost be asking our internal auditors to look at the external audit plan and say, you know, what should we be highlighting here? But we haven't got the capacity to do that, and we really need we just want to work with them rather than to feel that they are almost too frightened to talk with us. We want them to be our partners in this, we need to work with them on a committee scale as much as on an officer side.
They're not doing it.
But we need them to want to work with us, and I just feel that they're not wanting to work with us, and I'm really sad by that. So yeah, let's invite them for a meal or something. No, sorry, that was a little flippant. But we need to rebuild this relationship, and let's make sure that the coming relationship somehow is better.
I would take issue with there, Lucy. I'm appalled from a professional point of view. If I was, I'm a SITFA member, and I'm still a SITFA member, and from a professional point of view, this is appalling. I don't know what institute. I assume he's probably a chartered. I don't know what he. I'm not sure what he is, but I mean he will be chartered or whatever he is. Their professional institute would be appalled if they found out the attitude that he's taken, particularly, and the firm in the wider sense. And that's really what saddens me, because I in my position when I was in this thing, I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't dream of not turning up to a meeting. Yeah, you're right. You don't turn up to the whole meeting. You turn up for your bit, and you ask permission to go, and you go. But that's not unreasonable. But somebody should come. It's from a professional point of view. It's serious professional. It's bordering on serious professional misconduct, in my view, personally. I mean, and to treat the organisation the way in which he particularly does, and which the organisation does, a document which is full of errors and all the rest of it, and they can't even be bothered to turn up and talk about it. Whether we wish to take it to professional complaints, I don't know. I mean, that's a matter for us to think about. But it's a bit extreme. But we're in an extreme position, in my view. Professional incompetence, quite frankly, this is.
Because maybe I didn't express myself correctly, but I was very much saying that we want these people to be professional, and the implication being that they aren't, because we want to work with a professional body to do the job that they need to do. But as you say, they aren't providing the service we would be expecting.
But as Alison said, we've given them plenty of opportunities to come along to meetings, to talk about meetings. You know, how much longer do we go on with this? You're right, Lucy. Yes, you should give them a chance. But I feel they've had that chance. And several times they've had that chance.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I don't know whether they've been attending. There were monthly meetings set up with the Chief Exec and Simon. I don't know, Alison, if you know if they're still happening. No, thank you for that, because, yeah, there were regular meetings, and after the meetings with Simon and Paul, I had a meeting with Simon and Hassan scheduled sort of quarterly. Councillor Hazelgrave, you wanted to come in?
I think we just got to demonstrate that we're being tenacious with this, and you know we're like a dog with a bone. We want it resolving, and the only way we can do that is to reschedule it for the next meeting. And that surely increases the pressure on them in terms of not appearing twice. And this being aired in a public meeting, it's not reputationally of any advantage to them. In fact, it's quite the contrary.
Councillor Kerr?
just like maybe to mention to them that we've tried to strengthen our relationship with the external auditor in saying that we want private meetings rather than just informal briefings as part of our terms of reference. We want them to work with us.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've expressed my frustrations on many occasions. I've also given benefit of the doubt where it's due, and as we've said at many meetings, and Alison has reminded us again today, that the whole sector is short-staffed. There aren't enough of them to do all the audits that they're having to do. I'm just increasingly frustrated that we always seem to come bottom, and it may well be that everybody else that they're dealing with thinks that they're at the bottom of the pile as well, and it's not just us, and that nobody's satisfied with it. So what I suggest then is that, Philip, if you could email over your page and a half of notes, and more that come, as I'm sure you're typing those up, and that anybody else that has questions does the same and sends them to Dom, and that Councillor Kerr turns her microphone off again, and that we send them over to Dom, and that Dom, if you can send them to EY and copy all the committee members in so that everybody has oversight of those questions, that would be really helpful. And if we can ask them both on email and in the meeting tomorrow for them to attend the June committee. Is everybody as happy as they can be with that? Yeah? Okay, super. Right, so item 16 is the exclusion of press and public. To consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following items. That under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 7 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information.